The first sign something was off was the sound, a thin, steady hiss coming from the executive kitchen, like someone had left a kettle half on and walked away. I was crouched behind the network cabinet with my phone flashlight angled into the dust, trying to trace a loose cable when the noise cut through the wall again. I remember thinking, not this machine, not today. A few minutes later, I heard a voice in the hallway, bright and practiced. Can you step into conference room C when you have a minute? It wasn't a request. It was the kind of line people use when they've already decided the ending. I wiped my hands on my jeans, stood slowly, and walked out from behind the cabinet. I didn't say much. I just nodded once, like I was being invited to a normal meeting on a normal Monday. On my way there, I passed the glass doors to the main office and caught my own reflection. Gray cardigan, hair pinned back, a faint smear of dust on my sleeve. The same cardigan I'd worn through 3 office expansions, 2 minor floods, and 1 electrical fire that started because someone plugged a space heater into a power strip and acted surprised when it smoked. In the lobby, the air still smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. The cleaning crew had done what they could, but someone had left old takeout in the break room fridge over the weekend, and it had turned into its own weather system. I fixed that too, even though it wasn't technically my job. Most things weren't, not anymore. My name is Diane Mercer. I'm 53, and for most of my adult life, I was the person who opened that building before sunrise and made sure it didn't fall apart before lunch. I got there every day at 6:40 a.m., without fail. The front door still used a brass key, the original one they handed me back in 2003 when the company had 8 employees and a single copier that jammed if you looked at it wrong. I kept that key oiled. Twice a year, the same week I changed the air filters and the same week I checked the water heaters, because routines are how you keep chaos from breeding. That morning, the office was doing what it always did when nobody was watching. A faucet in the women's restroom dripped like it was counting down something. The east hallway thermostat blinked low battery, even though I'd replaced it last month. The carpet near the conference rooms had a faint sticky spot from an old kombucha spill that no one ever confessed to, and of course, the CEO's espresso machine was hissing again. Years ago, I found out it was on the same circuit as the East Wing HVAC. I didn't discover it because someone told me. I discovered it because the AC died on a hot August afternoon, and half the office started sweating into their laptops like it was a crisis drill. No one documented that wiring. I did, on a yellow legal pad I kept in my desk drawer, back when we still had desk drawers. The thing about working facilities is you become a kind of quiet memory for everyone else. People forget the building has rules until something stops working. Then suddenly they're standing too close, asking questions, acting like you're part of the furniture, right up until they need you again. I used to correct people when they got my name wrong. At some point, I stopped. It didn't seem worth the energy. By the time I reached conference room C, I had already clocked the usual signs. Someone from product had left sushi in the mini fridge, the paper shredder bin was overflowing, and my inbox had a few thousand unread messages labeled urgent from people who couldn't replace a toner cartridge without treating it like surgery. Inside the conference room, the blinds were half closed. The lights were a little too bright. The table was too clean, like somebody wiped it down for company. A woman from HR sat near the end. Tessa knew enough that she still spoke in cheerful sentences that didn't match the room. Next to her was a man I hadn't met. Legal, probably. His folder sat in front of him like it had weight. They looked up when I walked in. Tessa smiled first, the kind of smile you learn in training. "Diane," she said, like we were about to talk about benefits enrollment. I sat down slowly and folded my hands on the table. I didn't ask what this was. I didn't give them anything to lean on. For a second, nobody spoke, just the air conditioner humming, steady and indifferent. Then the man from legal slid the folder forward, 2 inches, careful, like he'd practiced the motion. And as I looked at that folder, I noticed something small that didn't belong. A paperclip on the corner of the documents, bright pink, the kind you buy in a pack when you're trying to make a workspace feel fun. I stared at it longer than I probably should have, because I'd seen that exact kind of paperclip once before, years ago, in a file that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I kept my face neutral. I kept my breathing slow. Tessa started talking, soft and steady, like she was reading from a script she didn't write. And I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just sat there, letting the words land, and feeling something settle into place, quietly, like a latch turning. When she finished, the room went still again. I looked down at the folder. Then I waited. I didn't open the folder right away. I let it sit there between us like it belonged to someone else. Tessa's smile stayed fixed, but her hands kept shifting, one finger tapping the edge of her notebook, then stopping, then starting again. The man from legal watched my face as if he was waiting for me to give him something he could write down. Finally, I pulled the folder toward me and flipped it open. 3 months' pay, a standard release, a short paragraph about confidentiality that pretended it was for everyone's safety, health coverage through the end of the month. The letter had my name typed correctly, but my job title was wrong, something vague like office support. I'd been facilities and operations manager for years. Before that, I'd been whatever the building needed. The person who knew which breaker controlled which floor. The person who had the vendor numbers saved in my phone. The person who could hear a duct rattle and tell you which screw had loosened. I looked up and met Tessa's eyes. "So you want my keys today?" I said. The legal guy answered, not her. "Yes, badge and keys need to be surrendered immediately. Also, any company property in your possession." I nodded once, like we were discussing something simple. Then I reached into my tote bag. My badge went on the table first. The lanyard was frayed where it rubbed against my jacket zipper. After that, the keys. There were 10 of them, all labeled in my handwriting, because the labels the locksmith used never lasted more than a month. I set the ring down carefully. No noise, no flourish. Tessa's gaze flicked to the keys, and I saw it. She didn't recognize half of them. Most people wouldn't. Most people never needed to know there was a separate key for the utility closet behind the loading dock, or that the elevator override lived on a tiny brass tag I kept on the inside of the ring. I held her look for a beat. "You sure?" I asked. Her eyebrows lifted. "I'm sorry?" "You're sure you want all of them?" I said, calm and plain. "Everything." The legal guy started to speak, but Tessa nodded quickly. "Yes, that's standard." I leaned back in the chair. My hands rested in my lap. "All right," I said. "Then we're done." I stood, adjusted my cardigan at the elbow, and walked out without waiting for a response. Not because I was trying to make a point, because there wasn't anything left to say that would matter in that room. In the hallway, the air felt cooler. The fluorescent lights made everything look washed out. I walked past the copy area and watched an intern struggle with the machine, pushing buttons in the wrong order. I could have fixed it in 10 seconds. I kept walking. Outside, the sun hit my eyes like a slap. The sidewalk was loud, traffic, construction, someone laughing too hard on a phone call. I stood by my car for a moment with my hand on the door handle, breathing in and out through my nose, slow enough that my shoulders didn't rise. I didn't cry. I didn't feel like giving them that, even privately. I got into the driver's seat and didn't start the engine. I sat there and stared straight ahead, letting the quiet of the car close around me. My phone was in the cup holder, face down. The espresso machine hiss from earlier was still in my head, like a reminder. After a minute, I drove, not home, just down the street to a donut shop parking lot, the kind with faded striping and a cracked curb. I parked, turned the car off, and reached for my phone. There was one person I wanted to speak to before anyone else. Evan. Evan was a real estate attorney now. I'd known him since he was a teenager who mowed lawns in my neighborhood to save for college. He was sharp, careful with words, and he had the kind of calm that came from reading contracts for a living. He picked up on the second ring. "Diane?" he said. "Everything okay?" I looked out at the storefront glass, at my own reflection again, tired eyes, steady face. "No," I said, "but I think it's about to be." He didn't rush me, he just waited. "You remember that lease from back when we moved into the building?" I asked. There was a pause, and then his voice lowered slightly. "Yeah, I remember." "Good," I said, "because I just got let go, and they asked for all the keys." Another pause, longer this time. "Diane," he said carefully, "do they know whose name is on that lease?" I watched a delivery truck roll past, slow and heavy. I didn't smile. Not yet. No, I said. I don't think they've ever looked. Evan exhaled, like he was already seeing the paperwork in his mind. All right, he said. Tell me exactly what you have. I reached behind the passenger seat and pulled out my tote bag. At the bottom, under a folded umbrella and a crumpled receipt, was a small plastic tab, my house key. I held it between my fingers, feeling its weight. Give me an hour, I said. I'm going home to open a file. Then I ended the call, set the phone face down again, and sat there for a moment longer. Because there's a certain kind of quiet that only shows up right before something changes, and I knew I was standing in it. I started the car and drove home. My house was quiet when I got there. The kind of quiet that doesn't rush you. The windows were open just enough to let the late afternoon air move the curtains. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and went straight down the hallway to the small closet near the bathroom. Most people use closets for coats. I used this one for contingencies. The folder was exactly where I'd left it. Bright blue, too bright to miss, labeled in thick black marker, building, originals. I hadn't opened it in years, but I hadn't needed to. Some things you don't revisit unless you have to. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down. The chair creaked in the same spot it always had. I smoothed the folder once with my palm before opening it, like that mattered. Inside was the original lease agreement from 2003, my name typed cleanly at the top. Not as a co-signer, not as a representative, as the tenant. Behind it were amendments. Every renewal, every modification, notes in the margins, a receipt for the lobby rug I'd paid for myself when the company couldn't, a sticky note with a crooked drawing one of the founders' kids had made during a meeting years ago, back when the office was a single floor above a noodle shop. I read slowly, not because I didn't understand it, because I wanted to be precise. Page 11. Renewal clause. I stopped, read it again. Then I reached for my calendar and checked the date, August 3rd. The lease expiration date sat there in plain print, August 1st. I didn't react right away. I just stared at it, letting the meaning settle without emotion. They hadn't renewed, no email, no written notice, no signature, nothing. 2 days late. I leaned back in my chair and rested my hands on the table. My pulse stayed steady. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. I went through the rest of the folder. Insurance documents, still in my name. Utility accounts, set up under an account I'd opened years ago when the building needed a responsible party. Maintenance contracts routed through my email, cleaning services paid through a monthly transfer I'd set up when accounting kept forgetting. Everything that kept the building alive quietly flowed through me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old messages, not to gloat, just to confirm. There it was, the last reminder I'd sent about lease renewal, unanswered. I closed the folder, then I made tea, chamomile. I let it steep longer than usual. When Evan called back, I was sitting at the table again, the folder closed but within reach. Okay, he said. Talk to me. I'm the tenant of record, I said. They missed the renewal window. There was a soft sound on his end, papers moving, a pen tapping. That gives you options, he said. Clear ones. I don't want noise, I said. I want it clean. Then we do this step by step, he replied. No warnings you're not required to give, no emotion, just process. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. We went through it together, slowly, carefully. Step 1, confirm status with the property manager. Step 2, formal notice. Step 3, replacement tenant, already lined up. I didn't ask how he knew I'd have one. He knew me. After the call, I sat alone for a while. The sun shifted across the kitchen floor. My cat jumped onto the chair beside me and curled up like nothing in the world had changed. I felt something then, not triumph, relief. For years, I'd carried the building without anyone noticing the weight. Now, the weight had shifted on its own. I picked up the folder again and slid it into my bag. Then I waited. Because the next move wasn't mine to announce. It was mine to execute. And silence, for once, was doing exactly what I needed it to do. The property manager's office was on the 4th floor, tucked behind a glass wall that always smelled faintly like toner and burnt coffee. I wore flat black shoes, not for comfort, but because they made a solid sound on tile. I didn't rush. I signed in, took a seat, and waited until my name was called. When Mark looked up from his desk, his surprise was brief but real. "Diane," he said, "didn't expect to see you." "I know," I replied. I sat down and set my bag at my feet. "I just need to confirm something." He gestured for me to continue. I opened the folder and slid the lease across the desk. Original copy. Amendments clipped in order. "I want to verify that no written renewal was received before August 1st, I said. Mark turned to his computer, fingers moving quickly. He checked twice. I watched his eyes narrow slightly as the answer took shape. "No," he said. "Nothing on record. We assumed month to month while things worked themselves out." I nodded. "That matches my understanding." He leaned back. "You know what that means?" "Yes," I said. "Which is why I'm here." I took out a single-page document and placed it on top of the lease. Notice of termination, 30 days. His eyebrows lifted. "You're terminating the tenancy." "As the tenant of record," I said. "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "Do they know?" "They were informed," I said. "Through the channels specified in the lease." Which was true. Certified mail, email, proper notice. Mark rubbed his forehead once. "This will be complicated." "Only if someone tries to make it that way," I said. I stood, thanked him for his time, and left before questions could turn into opinions. That afternoon, Evan filed the paperwork. I paid the expedite fee without hesitation. The confirmation email arrived with a simple timestamp and a case number. I read it once, then archived it. 2 hours later, my inbox chimed again. From HR. Subject: confirmation of returned property. The message was polite, professional, thorough in the way only HR emails can be when they're trying to cover every angle. They wanted written confirmation that I'd returned all company property, physical and digital, keys, documents, assets. I didn't overthink my reply. "Yes," I wrote, "including the items you weren't aware were in my possession." I hit send. I didn't add punctuation. I didn't add explanation. That night, I organized my kitchen drawer, the one that never quite closes right. I threw away old batteries, straightened the pens, wiped down the counter. Order has a way of grounding things. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Evan texted first. "Notice posted tomorrow. Enforcement approved." A second message followed. "You're clear." I set the phone face down. Later, a message from a former coworker came through. Short. "Something weird is happening here." I didn't reply. I folded laundry, watered the plants, let the day move at its own pace. Because once the process starts, it doesn't need encouragement. It just needs time. And time, finally, was on my side. The call came that evening, just after dinner. I was standing at the sink, rinsing a plate, when my phone lit up on the counter. A name I recognized, one I hadn't seen in months. I dried my hands before picking it up. I let it ring once more than necessary. "Diane," he said when I answered. No greeting, no warmth. "What's going on?" I leaned back against the counter and listened to the refrigerator hum. "You tell me." "We've got an eviction notice on the door," he said. His voice was tight now. "This has to be a mistake." "It isn't," I said. A pause. Papers shuffling. I imagined him standing in his office, pacing the same strip of carpet I'd replaced twice. "You can't do this," he said. "We're in the middle of—" I interrupted him gently. "I didn't do anything outside the lease." "That lease," he stopped himself. "We assumed—" "That's where this went wrong," I said. "You assumed." Silence. Then a breath, forced steady. "We need to talk about reversing this," he said. "The board is concerned. Legal is concerned." "I'm sure they are," I said. "Diane," he tried again, softer this time. "You blindsided us." I looked down at the countertop, at a faint scratch I'd never noticed before. "No," I said. I responded. "There's a difference." He exhaled sharply. "What do you want?" I thought about that for a moment, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to be exact. I want you to read the lease, I said. All of it, especially the parts you never had reason to look at before. Another pause, longer. We can offer a settlement, he said. Consulting, compensation, whatever this takes. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. That time has passed. You're putting hundreds of people in a bind. I'm holding you to an agreement you benefited from for years, I said. The outcome is a consequence, not a decision I made today. His voice dropped. This will follow you. I've already carried worse, I said. I reached for my phone with my other hand and drafted an email while we were still connected, addressed to him, legal, HR, facilities, attached, the lease, the amendments, the notice, the confirmation. Check your inbox, I said. There was a faint notification sound on his end. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. We'll be in touch. I expect you will, I said. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, and then set it face down. I didn't feel anything dramatic, just lighter, like something heavy had finally been set where it belonged. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere, a door closed, and I let the silence do the rest. The confirmation didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, the way real consequences usually do. First, a message from Evan early the next morning. Short, factual, enforcement scheduled, marshal assigned, no appeal filed. I read it once, then set the phone down and finished my coffee. The kettle clicked off. The house stayed quiet. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. A former co-worker. Someone from facilities. They're panicking, the message read. No one can find the renewal paperwork. Legal's asking questions no one can answer. I didn't reply. By noon, the property manager sent a formal notice by email. Polite, precise. Timelines laid out in clean bullet points. 30 days had elapsed. No response logged. Termination valid. Vacate date confirmed. Everything matched the documents in my folder. That afternoon, a local business site ran a small piece. No names at first, just downtown firm faces unexpected eviction amid lease dispute. The comments filled in the rest faster than the article ever could. People remember who's been somewhere a long time. By the next day, the notice was posted on the building doors. Bright, impossible to miss. I saw a photo of it later, taken from across the street. Glass reflecting the sky, the paper centered and unarguable. Inside the company, the story unraveled quickly. Meetings stacked on meetings, calls to landlords who didn't have space, promises made too late. Someone finally pulled the full lease and realized what had been missed and who had signed it. My phone rang once that evening. I let it go to voicemail. The message was brief, apologetic, too carefully worded to mean anything now. I deleted it. 2 days later, Evan called. They're out of options, he said. Moving trucks are booked, new tenants' deposit cleared. I thanked him and ended the call. That night, I sorted paperwork at my dining table. Old manuals, warranties, notes I'd kept for years because no one else ever did. I recycled what wasn't needed, shredded the rest. By the end of the week, the building was empty. Chairs stacked, whiteboards erased, the hum of constant activity replaced by a hollow quiet that only shows up when something is truly finished. I drove past once, slowly, just to see it. The lights were off, the doors locked. A banner for the incoming tenant was rolled up by the entrance, waiting. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to manage there. That evening I went home, washed a mug, and set it upside down on the rack. The motion felt final in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in years, there was nothing pending. And that was enough. The Monday after everything cleared, I woke up at my usual time anyway. Old habits don't disappear just because they're no longer required. The house was still. Early light came through the kitchen window in a thin line across the counter. I made coffee, not rushing it, and stood there while it brewed, listening to the quiet hum of something that belonged to me. No inbox to check, no building to unlock. No problems waiting quietly for my hands. After breakfast, I cleaned out a drawer I'd been avoiding for years. Instruction manuals for things I no longer owned. Business cards from people who'd forgotten my name before I forgot theirs. I threw most of it away. What I kept fit in a small folder, thin enough to close without force. Later, I took a walk, just around the neighborhood. I noticed things I'd missed before. New paint on a fence, a dog I hadn't seen in a while, the sound of someone practicing piano with the window open. Ordinary things, steady things. In the afternoon, Evan sent one last message. All settled. New tenants moved in, keys transferred. I replied with a simple thank you. That evening, I cooked dinner slowly. Nothing fancy. I ate at the table instead of standing at the counter. When I finished, I washed the dishes right away and dried them with a clean towel. I like things finished. In the hallway, there's a small hook near the door. For years, it held my work keys, the heavy ring that opened everything and tied me to a building that no longer needed me. I took the hook down. Not because I was angry, not because I was trying to forget, because I didn't need it anymore. I put the hook in a drawer and closed it gently. Then I sat down with a book and read until the light shifted enough that I needed to turn on a lamp. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in layers. You notice it in small ways, how your shoulders drop, how your breathing evens out, how the day no longer feels like something you have to survive. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. A message sat unread from someone I used to work with. A short question, careful, curious. I didn't answer it yet. Some stories don't need rescuing, some people do. And sometimes, you only realize the difference after you've lived through both. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. If you enjoyed the story, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps keep this little corner going. Let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. 2 more stories will be waiting for you next, whenever you're ready.